I am Jodeline Basok and I am assigned to tackle the meaning of outcome-based education, outcome-based teaching and learning, and understanding by design. Now, what is outcome-based education? Outcome-based education is a process of curriculum design, teaching, learning, and assessment that focuses on what students can actually do after they are taught. Outcome-based education is often seen an effective approach to promote deeper learning, critical thinking, problem solving skills, and the ability to transfer knowledge to real world situation. It focuses on preparing students for specific outcomes or competencies required in their chosen fields of discipline. Now we have types of outcome based education. First is the immediate outcome. It is the outcome or skills upon completion of a lesson, subject, or program itself. A change that is expected to occur once one or more outputs have been provided or delivered by the implementer. In terms of time frame and level, these are short-term outcomes. Example of this is the ability to communicate in writing, reading, speaking, and solve mathematical problems. The next is the deferred outcomes. It is the ability in cognitive and competencies in various aspects of professionalism. It is also refers of delaying the assessment of learning outcomes until a later point in time, typically after an extended period of instruction or training. Instead of assessing immediate or short-term outcomes, deferred outcomes assessment focuses on measuring the attainment of long-term outcomes or competencies. Example are the success in professional practice or occupation as evidence of skill career planning, health and wellness, and continuing education. Now, we have also the transformational outcome based learning. In this outcome, learning is significant unless the outcome reflect the complexities of real life and give prominence to the life role that learners will face after formal education. Now we have also a four principle of OBE by Spady 1993 identified four basic principle of outcome-based education. First is the clarity of focus outcomes. In these outcomes, learners are certain about their goals and are always given significant culminating exit outcomes. The second one is designing backwards, using the major learning outcomes as the focus and linking all planning, teaching, and assessment decision directly to these outcomes. Now, the third one is the consistent high expectation of success. Now, in this outcome, helping students to success by providing them encouragement to engage deeply with the issues they are learning and to achieve the set of high challenging standard. And the last one is the expanded opportunity, developing curriculum that allows every learner to progress in his or her own pace and that caters to individual needs and differences. Okay, the next one is the OBTL outcome-based teaching and learning. Bings and Tang 2007 make use the term outcome-based teaching learning. OBTL, which is essence, and OBE applied the teaching learning process. In Bings and Tang's OBTL, outcomes are statements of what we expect students to demonstrate after they have been taught. These are referred to the learning outcomes. In OBTL, the learning outcomes are identified and defined first, specifying what students should know, understand, and be able to do by the end of the learning experiences. These outcomes are often expressed as clear and measurable statements that can be assessed. They may include knowledge, skills, attitude, and values that students are expected to acquire. Now, we have different levels of outcomes. First is the institutional outcome. The most broad are institutional outcomes and the most specific are learning outcomes. A range from most broad to most specific outcomes start with institutional outcomes. The second one is the program outcomes. Outcomes that graduates of the program are expected to demonstrate at the end of the program. And the third one is the course outcomes, the particular subject outcomes. And the last one is the learning outcomes, the most specific outcomes that the teacher is concerned with his or her specific lesson. Now we have also the UBD, or Understand by Design. Understand by Design is the educational framework developed by McTighe and Grant Wiggins. It focuses on designing curriculum, instruction, and assessment that prioritize deep understanding and transfer of knowledge. Now, according to Wiggins and McTighe 2005, Understanding by Design emphasizes the importance of defining clear learning goals and objectives before planning instructional activities. Now, in Understanding by Design, we have stages. The first stage is identify desired result. Educators begin by clarifying the learning goals and objectives. They define what students should understand and be able to do at the end of the unit or course. This stage involves establishing clear learning outcomes, essential questions, and enduring understanding that guide the instructional design process. And in stage 2, determine acceptable evidences, focuses on designing assessment and performance tasks that provide evidence of students understanding the mastery of desired outcome. Educators considered various types of assessments such as traditional tests, projects, presentation, and performance to gauge students' depth of understanding. Now, the last stage is plan learning experiences. Involves designing learning activities and instructional strategies that support students in developing that desired understanding. Now, in this stage, educators considered how to engage students, provide opportunities for practice and application, and scaffold learning experiences effectively. This stage emphasizes that alignment of instructional activities with the identified learning outcomes. Outcome-based education, or OBE, and outcome-based teaching and learning, or OBTL, share common essence of focusing on learning outcomes and student-centered approaches, but they have different application and emphasis. Both OBE and OBTL prioritize learning outcomes and student engagement, but OBE primarily focuses on the overall curriculum and alignment, while OBTL concentrates on creating effective and meaningful learning experiences within the curriculum to achieve those outcomes. Now, in outcome-based education, it is centered around clearly defining desire. Learning outcomes are aligned all aspects of all educational process to achieve those outcomes. The essence of OBE can be summarized as follows. First, it has a clear learning outcomes. OBE starts with the end in mind. It defines specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bounded or SMART learning outcomes that students should demonstrate by the end of a course or program. Next is it has backward design. OBE follows as backward design process. Educators begin by identifying the desired outcomes and then design curriculum, instruction, and assessment methods that support the achievement of those outcomes. And it also have OBE also aligned curriculum and instruction. It ensures that curriculum and instructional strategies are directly aligned with the stated learning outcomes. This alignment helps students to focus on achieving the desired competencies. Assessment for learning. Next, the assessment for learning. OBE emphasizes the use of assessment as a tool for learning rather than just a measuring of learning. Assessment methods are designed to measure students' progress towards the outcomes and provide feedback for improvement. And the last one is OBE is a student-centered approach. It is focused from teaching to learning. It empowers students to take ownership of their learning and encourage active engagement in the educational process. While in outcome-based teaching and learning or OBTL, it is, on the other hand, it is more specific to the teaching and learning process, aiming to create meaningful and engaging learning experiences for students. The essence of OBTL includes the following: OBTL alignment with outcomes. Like OBTL place a strong emphasis on aligning teaching and learning activities with the intended learning outcomes. The instructional design is tailored to help students achieve those outcomes effectively. And OBTL also active in learning. OBTL promotes active learning strategies where students are encouraged to participate, collaboration, and engage with the subject matter actively. It moves away from passive lecture-based teaching to interactive and hands-on learning experiences. OBTL also has an authentic assessment. OBTL incorporates authentic assessment that mirror real-world scenarios. This assessment evaluates students' abilities to apply their learning to practical situations, demonstrate their understanding and skills in relevant contexts. Feedback and reflection. OBTL also encourages continuous feedback and self-reflection. Students receive feedback in their progress, which help them identify areas for improvement and take ownership for their learning journey. And lastly, it has a lifelong learning. OBTL fosters a learning mindset beyond the classroom. It equips students with the skills and attitude necessary for lifelong learning and adaptability in rapidly changing world. Now, OBE or outcome-based education and OBTL or outcome-based teaching, learning, and understanding by design are three different educational frameworks to approach that it aims to improve teaching and learning. Now, these educational frameworks or approach aims to improve teaching and learning outcomes. Now, to compare these three, first we have the focus. Now, what is the focus of this educational framework? Now, in OBE, it focuses on clear, defined learning outcomes as essential components of the educational process. It emphasizes what students should be able to do or demonstrate at the end of the course program. In UBD, it focuses on understanding the meaning making rather than mere acquisition of knowledge. It aims to develop students' deep understanding of important concept and transferable skills. In outcome-based teaching and learning, it focuses on aligning teaching and learning activities with desired outcome. It emphasizes an active and student-centered approach to learning. Now, next we have the design. Now, in OBE involves designing course and curriculum backwards from the desired outcome. It begins with the identification of learning outcomes and then determines the appropriate instructional strategies, assessment method, and learning experiences to achieve those outcomes. In UBD, it emphasizes designing curriculum and instruction based on the desired understanding and performance. It involves identifying essential questions, determining desired understanding, and planning assessment that measure students' understanding and ability to transfer their learning. In OBTL, It involves designing teaching and learning experiences that help students achieve the desired outcomes. It includes the selection of appropriate instructional strategies, learning resources, and assessment methods aligned with the outcomes. Now, next is the assessment. Now, in OBE, assessment is aligned with the desired outcomes. It involves evaluating students' performance based on the stated outcomes and providing feedback for improvement. Now, in UBD, assessment. Now, in UBD, assess. In UBD, assessment is authentic and performance-based, aiming to evaluate students' understanding and application of knowledge in real-world context. Now, in OBTL, assessment is aligned with the desired outcomes and include a variety of formative and summative assessment. It aims to provide feedback to students and guide their learning process. Now, what are the emphases of this educational framework? In OBE, it emphasizes accountability, student-centered learning, and aligning curriculum and instructional with real-world application. Now, in UBD, it emphasizes backward design, enduring understanding, and essential questions and transfer of learning to promote a meaningful and authentic learning experiences. Now, in OBTL, it emphasizes students' engagement, active learning, and the integration of teaching, learning, and assessment to foster deep understanding and skills development. While all three approaches focus on outcomes and student-centered learning, they differ in their specific design and assessment methodology. OBE centers on a clear defined outcomes and aligned curriculum and instruction. OBE emphasizes understanding and transfer of learning, and OBTL focuses on aligning teaching and learning activities with outcomes to foster active and meaningful learning experiences. Educators can choose the approach that aligns best with their educational goals and context. That's all for my report. Thank you.
Good day, everyone! By the way, I am Juvie Almanto. I will be the one to discuss what is learning outcomes and the sources of learning outcomes. So now, let's define first what is learning outcomes. Okay, learning outcomes are the knowledge, skills, and values that students are expected to demonstrate at the end of the lesson and are specific statements that describe what a learner is expected to know, understand, and be able to do at the end of learning process or learning experiences. So these learning outcomes are the intended results of the learning process and provide a framework for planning, delivering, and assessing instructions. So learning outcomes define the knowledge, skills, and values that learners are expected to develop and demonstrate, and they are typically written in clear, measurable terms that enable educators to assess whether the desired learning has taken place. Okay, so now let's differentiate what is teaching objectives and learning outcomes. So teaching objectives is not the same to learning outcomes. So teaching objectives are teacher-centered while learning outcomes are student-centered. So first, teaching objectives are specific, measurable goals that a teacher sets for their students to achieve during lesson or a unit of study. So these objectives are outlined what the teacher wants their students to know, understand, and be able and be able to do as a result of the instruction. So these objectives provide a clear direction for the lesson and help to ensure that students are learning and progressing towards mastery of the subject matter. So therefore, teaching objectives are formulated from the teacher's point of view and what the teacher does for delivering, planning, and assisting the students in conducting the lesson. However, learning outcomes, are the knowledge, skills, and values demonstrated by the learner at the end of the lesson or the learning process. So these are the product of what the teaching objectives sets and achieves in the learning experiences. So that is the difference between teaching objectives and learning outcomes. So where the teaching objectives, these are formulated from the teacher's point of view, while the learning outcomes are formulated from the students' point of view, or their understanding and learning of the subject matter or of the specific topic. Okay? So that is learning outcomes. Now let's proceed to the sources of learning outcomes. So there are different sources of learning outcomes. So learning outcomes derive from the following. First, sources of learning outcome. First, vision and mission statements and educational institutions. So vision and mission statements are important components of educational institutions' identity and purpose. So a vision statement is a statement that defines an organization's aspirations and long-term goals. So kaning vision, it outlines what the institutions aims to achieve in the future. So at the right side, makita na to ang DepEd vision na gi-establish sa Department of Education in Philippines. So ako siyang basahon. Kay the DepEd vision, we dream of Filipinos who passionately love their country and whose values and competencies enable them to realize their full potential and contribute meaningfully to building the nation. As a learner-centered public institution, the Department of Education continuously improve itself to better serve its stakeholders. So that is the DepEd vision of the Department of Education Philippines. Okay, let's proceed to the mission. The DepEd mission and core values of the Department of Education in the Philippines. So a mission is a statement that outlines an organization's purpose and reason for existence, and it summarizes what the institutions does and how it does. So at the right side, nakita nato ang pictures that the DepEd mission and our core values of the Department of Education in Philippines. Okay? So the DepEd mission and core values: to protect and promote the right of every Filipino to quality, equitable, culture-based, and complete basic education where students learn in a child-friendly, gender-sensitive, safe, and motivating environment. So teachers facilitate learning and constantly nurture every learner. Administrators and staff, as stewards of the institution, ensure an enabling and supportive environment for effective learning to happen. Family, community, and other stakeholders are actively engaged and share responsibility for developing lifelong learners. And the DepEd core values: makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, at makakabansa. So those are the DepEd vision, mission, and core values of the Philippines, of the Department of Education in Philippines. Okay, now next source is policies, outcomes, and competencies issued by the Department of Education, such as the Philippine Professional Standards for Teacher, or what we call PPST. So the Department of Education in the Philippines has issued several policies, outcomes, and competencies for teachers, including the PPST, or the Philippine Professional Standards for Teachers. So the Philippine Professional Standards for teachers, this is a set of guidelines that defines the competencies and qualities that teachers in the Philippines should possess. So this excuse me. So those standards cover areas such as content knowledge, pedagogy, assessment, and professional development. Next is program outcomes for teacher education issued by the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED. So the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, in the Philippines has issued program outcomes for teacher education. So these outcomes are designed to ensure that teacher education programs meet the standards set by the CHED and prepare graduates for a successful career in teaching. So there are some examples of program outcomes for teacher education issued by the CHED, or by the Commission on Higher Education. First, graduates of teacher education program should possess a strong foundation in the principles and theories of education, including the psychology of learning, curriculum development, and assessment. Next is graduates should be able to demonstrate effective teaching strategies and techniques, including the use of technology in the classroom. Graduates should be able to develop and implement curriculum that meets the needs of diverse learners, including students with special needs and those from different cultural backgrounds. And graduates should be able to assess students' learning and provide feedback that promotes students' growth and achievement. Okay, so those are some of the program outcomes for teacher education na gi-issued sa CHED, or Commission on Higher Education. Okay, the next source is the competency standards from Technical Education Skills Development Authority, or what we call TISDA. Okay? So the Technical Education Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, in the Philippines has established competency standards for various technical and vocational courses. So these standards are designed to ensure that graduates of these courses possess the necessary knowledge, skills, and attitudes to perform their jobs effectively. So, TISDA competency standards aim to ensure that graduates of technical educational courses are equipped with the necessary skills and knowledge to succeed in their chosen careers. So, some of competency standards established by the TESDA or Technical Education Skills Development Authority or the Automotive Services or Servicing, Food and Beverage Services. Third is Computer Hardware Services or Servicing, Electronics, and Beauty Care Services. Okay, those are those are the competency standards established by the TISDA. The next source is national and regional development goals and framework like the Philippine Qualifications Reference Framework. Okay, the Philippine Qualifications Reference Framework or PQRF is a national framework that provides a standardized way to describe and classify qualifications in the Philippines. So it aligns with the Asian Qualifications Reference Framework and the European Qualifications Framework, making it easier to compare qualifications across borders. So overall, these national regional development goals and frameworks, including the PQRF and the PQRF, work together to promote sustainable development and improve the quality of life for Filipinos. Okay, last is the international trends like 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Asian Qualifications Reference Framework, and needs of industry. So international trends such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Asian Qualifications Reference Framework have significant implications for the education and training sectors in the Philippines. These trends highlight the need for the education and training sector to align with the changing needs of the economy and society, and to ensure that graduates are equipped with the necessary skills and competencies to succeed in the future. Okay, in addition to these international trends, the needs of industry are also important considerations for the education and training sector in the Philippines. So industry needs are constantly evolving and changing, and educations and training programs must keep pace with these changes to ensure that graduates are equipped with the skills and competencies needed for the job market. Overall, these international trends and industry needs highlight the importance of ensuring that educations and training programs in the Philippines are aligned with the changing needs of the economy and society. Okay? So that are the sources of learning outcomes. So that's all my report. So the rest of the topics of this chapter will discuss to us by Mr. Alfredo Bacquiao.
Good day everyone, I am Alfredo Bacquiao. For the continuation, I will discuss to you the characteristics of a good learning outcomes. Good learning outcomes focuses on the application and integration of knowledge and skills acquired in a particular unit of instruction, like activities, course program, and etc. And it emerges from a process of reflection on the essential contents of a course. Here are the 7 characteristics of a good learning outcomes according to Corpus et al. 2021. First, good characteristics of a learning outcomes is centered on a student or learner. Good learning outcomes are learner-centered. They describe what the learner is able to do as a result of teaching. Teaching objectives belong to the teacher, while the learner outcomes belong to the learner. This characteristics focuses solely on the student. It is called as learner-centered. Teaching objectives is belong to the teacher, and the learning outcomes merely belongs to the student. The second characteristics of a good learning outcomes is based on and aligned with the institutional programs and course outcomes. Educational institutions realize their intended institutional outcomes, while program outcomes issued by the regulating body, and the course outcomes that each course or subject in the teacher education curriculum attains its course outcomes. The institutional or the school produces the graduates of an educational institution are supposed to be able to do beyond graduation. The program outcomes regulating body issued by the CHED create graduates of a particular educational programs or degrees that are able to do at the completion of the degree or program. Lastly, the course outcomes, it is the subject that teacher education curriculum students should demonstrate at the end of the course or a subject. Third, it is based and aligned with the local, national, and international trends and issues. According to social reconstructivist, reconstructionist point of view, that schools are not ivory towers. They are expected to help others and social problems, and so for relevance, it is necessary that learning outcomes are on and aligned with the current issues. Learning outcomes, meaning, are aligned with the issues and trends that are facing of the people in the local, here in our areas, regional with the Philippines, and around the globe. For the fourth characteristics of a good learning outcomes are known and very well understood by the both students and the faculty. Teacher starts the lesson by clarifying the learning outcomes to ensure that the students knows what is or are expected of him or her, meaning the learning must be clearly known by student and the teacher. Fifth, spectrum of thinking skills from simple remembering to creating, or from the lowest and simplest cognitive structural process to cognitive in Bloom's and Anderson's revised taxonomy of objectives, which assess learning of students in a various level of thinking. The learning outcomes must consider the level of the thinking of the students, such as the HOTS, or the higher order thinking skills, and the LATS, or the lower order thinking skills. These are being illustrated in the Bloom's Anderson's taxonomy from the low or simple level to highest or the complex level, which are remembering, understanding, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. For the sixth characteristics of a good learning outcome, they are SMART. SMART word from the letter S is specific, M measurable, A attainable, R result oriented, T time bound. It is first specific, meaning it should not be general, it should direct to the point. Second is measurable, it must be quantifiable through giving assessment. Third is attainable, the students should be able to accomplish at a given period of time. R is the result or impact it can be given to the students, or the alignment to instructional method and assessment. T is the limit or period of time to capture the learning outcomes. 7. The last characteristics of a good learning outcomes is useful and relevant to the learners. The learning outcomes is for the learners to attain at the end of the lesson. The learning outcome must realize the learners it's significant to their life. Meaning the learning outcome must help the learners to develop the skills and knowledge for them to use it in real life situations. Because they will learn if they can relate on it. Therefore, the good characteristics of our learning outcomes must be produced in a classroom environment, both the teacher and the students, in order to have an effective teaching and learning process. That's all.
Good day everyone, I am Shermi Simon. Today we're going to discuss about authentic assessment. We are done with the characteristics of good learning outcomes. Now we will go through its nature, features, and characteristics of authentic or performance assessment. Now, what is authentic assessment? Authentic assessment, according to Miller in 2011, it is a form of assessment in which students are asked to perform real-world tasks that demonstrate meaningful application of essential knowledge and skills. Simply means that authentic assessment is a performance assessment, an alternative assessment, and direct assessment. From teacher-centered activities, authentic assessment encourages a learner-centered class where the teacher's major role is to help students accept responsibility for their learning and become self-evaluators. Other term also of authentic assessment is non-test assessment. Now, what is non-test assessment? It refers to a formative assessment, which is an ongoing process to give feedback to students to increase their competence. According to Rigonet 2010, it is an alternative assessment in the sense that it diverges from the paper and pen test. These are the tests that do not force the students to give their acquired knowledge and skills from the subject. Additionally, non-test assessment, it is an informal, impromptu feedback or marginal comments on students' drafts. This assessment allows teachers to give specific comments and suggestions for students' work, helping them to improve their understanding and skills. It also enables students to become aware of their strengths and areas for improvement. Now we have here an examples of non-test. First, we have portfolio. It is a purposeful collection of students' works that exhibit the students' efforts, progress, and achievements in one or more areas of the curriculum. We are all familiar with this one. This is one of the performance test or assessment which we're going to measure the students' progress in terms of collecting their works or outputs and let them compile it throughout the course. Next, we have teacher observation. The teacher observes the students while they work to make certain the students understand the assignment and are on task. One of the example is cooperative learning. The teacher observation is a method used by teachers to monitor student progress and ensure the comprehension of the assignments. During this process, the teacher watches as the student work and paying attention to the actions and behaviors of the students to determine if they really comprehend the task at hand and remain focused on it. Next, we have slates or hand signals. Students use slates or hand signals as a means of signaling answers to the teachers. In a classroom setting, teacher will ask questions to test if students really understand their lessons, and they might do the hand signaling or the slates as a means of presenting their answer. Through this, we can ensure students' comprehension, and it allow the students' communication or the social interaction within the class. Next, we have the daily assignments. The student completes the work assigned on a daily basis to be completed at school or home. Daily assignments, often called as enrichment activity or additional activity to be or bring home assignment, bring home activity that will strengthen or develop their learning during the discussion of the teacher. It is one way to measure if students really master the given lesson or the topic being discussed. Next, we have journal. Students write daily on assigned or personal topics. This journal or journaling, students could reflect and express freely their personal views or insights to a certain topic, and it harnesses their analytical thinking skills. Next, we have games. Teachers utilize fun activities to have students practice and review concepts. Example, the trivia. Through this activity, students may challenge and recall their abilities and memory. They can reinforce their learning and improve their long-term retention of facts and concepts. Now let's move on to the seventh one, the projects. Students are tasked to create such poster, drawing, or personal adornment such as piece of jewelry and fingernail design. By engaging the students into a project, it will require them to actively apply their knowledge, which can lead to better retention of information compared to passive learning methods. Next, we have the debates. The students take opposing positions on a topic and defend their position. Example, the pros and cons of environmental issues. In here, students can learn to articulate their thoughts clearly, structure their arguments in a logical manner, and it will fosters intellectual growth. And also, it will lead them to become informed and engaged citizens. Next, we have the checklist. The teacher will make a list of objectives that students need to master and then check off the skill as the things not to be taught. Now, this will allow teachers keep on track about the students' progress, where it will determine which part of it students need to master or areas for improvement and which aspect of the curriculum need not to be taught. Next, the cartooning. Students will use drawings to depict situation and ideas. Example of this is the environmental issues. Now, through cartooning, it will provide a creative and engaging way for students to demonstrate their knowledge and skills in a more authentic and meaningful manner. Next, we have the models. The students produce a miniature replica of a given topic. Example, the planetarium. Now, in models, it can accommodate different learning styles, allowing students to express their knowledge and skills in ways that align with their strengths. Students can choose different approaches such as written reports, multimedia presentations, or practical demonstrations, enabling them to showcase their abilities in a format that suits them best. Next, the notes. Students will write a summary of the lesson, example, outline of the day's lesson. Now, in this example, it provides a valuable means of capturing and documenting such important data which would be useful for future tests. And it also harnesses their capability of in a way of thinking using their mind and of course the structure of the grammar or the way or the writing skills. Next, the panel discussion. A group of students verbally present information. Example, a discussion presenting both pros and cons. Now, in panel discussions, it provides an opportunity to gather diverse viewpoints from a group of experts or individuals with relevant knowledge. This allows for a comprehensive exploration of a topic or issue, which enhance the authenticity of the assessment by incorporating a range of perspectives. Next, the demonstrations. Students present a visual enactment of particular skill or activity. Example, proving that air has weight. Now, in demonstrations, it can simulate real-world scenarios or replicate the tasks that individuals would encounter in their actual work environment. Next, we have the problem solving. You are teaching a unit in physics on levers. To test your students' knowledge, you give a lab worksheet focusing on type of levers and forces. Now, in problem solving in authentic assessment, it offers a valuable opportunity for students to develop essential skills, apply knowledge in practical contexts, and prepare for real-world challenges. It supports higher order thinking, their collaboration, while also fostering motivation and engagement in learning process. Next, discussion. Students in class verbally interact on a given topic. Example, discussion on climate change. Now, through discussion, students could develop their communication skills and share their different perspectives and views on a certain thing or matter. Now, let's proceed to non-test indicators. Now, academic tests are typically relied upon to assess the performance of students in educational tasks. Since schools are charged with a major responsibility for preparing students to perform these tasks, academic tests are also used to evaluate whether and to what extent school programs have achieved their goals. Now, the use of single form assessment, example, the pencil and paper test, to monitor learner development or the performance of educational programs, however, may be less reliable. Moreover, if cognitive development is the only intended effect of school programs that is emphasized, as it is done when academic tests alone are used to assess performing, many significant areas of development that schools can and do effect will be neglected. Now let's move on to transversal competencies. Now, transversal competencies, it is a competencies that are transferable between jobs. That is why they are also called transferable competencies. Schools must therefore teach transversal competencies. These transversal competencies are much more than more information knowledge of mental and physical skills in the knowledge domain. In addition, people used to call them experience, soft skills, emotional intelligence, and employability skills. They are a set of competencies related to attitudes and values, knowing how to be, and procedures, the know-how. They can be used in a variety of situations and settings. Now let's move on to the features of authentic assessment. First, an emphasis on doing open-ended activities for which there is no correct objective answer and that may assess higher order thinking. In performance assessment, students have the choice to construct their own responses. This may pose greater challenges or challenge for scoring for teachers as compared to scoring traditional assessment, but may give opportunity for students to develop higher order or higher level thinking skills. Next, direct methods of evaluation. Now, oral presentations is the method in assessing students' learning and to exercise the paper and pencil test in a way to describe the good oral presentation of an individual. Next, we have the self-assessment. In this, students will be guided upon doing a certain task through a scoring rubric given by the teacher. Next, assessment of group performance as well as individual performance. They may evaluated for the group's output and individually for the individual members' contribution. Next, extended period of time for authentic assessment. In authentic assessment, it usually requires an extended period because it's an performance assessment where students or an individual should possess their innate skills and their capabilities to do such thing. Next, the characteristics of 21st century assessment. First, responsive. Visible performance work. Performance-based work generates data that inform curriculum and instruction. This is one of the characteristics that must be possessed here in the 21st century assessment, especially in the classroom, in the schools, in the educational institution, because it's an ongoing cycle of monitoring, assessing, and using data to enhance the educational experience of the students. Now, by closely observing and analyzing the students' performance, the educators can make informed decisions about their curriculum and instructions to optimize the learning outcomes. Next, the flexible. Flexible assessment needs to be adaptable to students' settings. Now, flexibility in 21st century assessment needs to be adapted or needs to be possessed as it supports a more inclusive and holistic approach to evaluating student learning. It also acknowledges the diverse ways in which students can demonstrate their knowledge and skills, promotes personalized learning experiences, and prepares students for the dynamic and ever-changing world they will face beyond the classroom. Next, we have integrated. Assessments are to be incorporated into the day-to-day practice rather than as add-on at the end of instruction or during a single specified week of the school calendar. Now, integrated, it reflects the needs to assess learners' abilities to apply knowledge and skills across disciplines and real-world contexts. It promotes the deeper learning, critical thinking, and the interdisciplinary problem solving. Next, informative. The assessment results information on whether or not to be informed and targeted 21st century skills. Both are clearly stated and explicitly taught are realized. Now,
informative or to be informed is one of the characteristics that must be possessed, especially in the 21st century assessment, as it aims to provide valuable feedback and insights to both students and educators. It goes beyond simply measuring knowledge and skills, and it focuses on understanding students' strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement. Next, multiple methods. It is an assessment continuum that includes a spectrum of assessment strategies in the norm. It is also one of the characteristics that must be possessed as employing multiple assessment methods. Educators can gain a deeper understanding of student learning. It promotes individual growth and support the development of diverse skills and abilities for success in the 21st century. But in, and next we have communicated. Communication of assessment data is clear and transparent for all stakeholders. Now, by incorporating to be communicated or by incorporating communication, it is a central characteristic in 21st century assessment, which aim to prepare students for the demands of the modern world. Now, these assessments not only evaluate subject knowledge but also foster the development of critical communication skills necessary for success in higher education, careers, and everyday life of an individual. Next, technically sound. For fairness, adjustments and accommodations are made in the assessment process to meet students' needs. Now, to be in technical soundness in assignments, it aligns with the integration of technology in education and facilitates more accurate, efficient, and equitable measurement of student learning in the 21st century. And for the last characteristics, we have systematic. It is a part of a comprehensive and well-aligned assessment system that is balanced and inclusive. Now, systematic assessment in the 21st century, it emphasizes a comprehensive, ongoing, and data-informed approach in evaluating student learning while considering individual differences and utilizing technology effectively. It also aims to promote meaningful learning, guide instructional decision making, and support also the development of lifelong learners. That will be all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I am Kirsten May Belenyo Kabatan from BEd 3B. So, now, my assigned topic is all about the authentic assessment complements traditional assessment. So, authentic assessment and traditional assessment complement each other. How can we say that they are complement from each other? So assessment is not a matter of either or. It is not a case of either you may use traditional or authentic. It is a matter of both. And both traditional and authentic assessment are necessary. Mastery of knowledge is the focus of traditional and authentic. And the must encourage is the focus of traditional assessment and must be encouraged among learners. So, this mastery of knowledge and skills is the foundation of the learner's ability to demonstrate and perform the tasks that they are expected to perform in the real world. In other words, learners perform or do the real world tasks if they don't have any mastered basic knowledge and skills. So in that case, we can say that authentic and traditional assessment complemented each other because they work both, so we can say it is complemented. So now let's tackle the authentic assessment. So there are two ways on how we can assess the performance of the student: the process oriented and the product oriented. So we all know that authentic assessment is a performance assessment. The performance can be process oriented or product oriented, just what I have said earlier. The learners is made either to demonstrate the skill or the process learned, or show the product of the application of learned knowledge and skills. So we will tackle first the process oriented assessment. So what is process oriented assessment? Learning outcomes in a form of procedural knowledge. Require demonstration of the process or procedure. So they call a process oriented assessment. So from the word itself, process, so there is a procedure. So there must have a procedure in order for the student to be able to gain that particular learnings or knowledge. For example, the teacher must give a student a performance task by singing. So as a teacher, you should be able to you will first the one who will sing that song. After that your students will sing along with you. So and the finale is your student should be able to sing that song by themselves. By that, there is a process or there is a procedure on how they can attain that performance. So there is a procedural process on how to gain that knowledge. Now let's move forward to the product-oriented assessment. So what is product-oriented assessment? So product-oriented assessment, it is a student performance may lead to a concrete product. These students' products are the concern of product-oriented authentic assessment. So when we say product-oriented, it is the outcome of the learnings of the student. For example, a PowerPoint presentation or a possession paper or a poem composed. So, as a teacher, you will give a student a task wherein they will be able to read or they will be able to make a poem by themselves. So, by that, the poem will be the outcome or the product of the learnings of the students. So that are the two ways on how we can assess the learnings of the students in the authentic assessment. So that's all for my report. I hope you understand.
Good day, everybody. For today, let us talk about the DepEd's emphasis on performance assessment. Now, according to the DepEd Order Series of 2015 to 08, the summative assessment includes three components. These are the written work, the performance task, and quarterly assessment. Now, in quarterly assessment, this includes the objective test or the written test and the performance-based assessment. Now, in quarterly assessment, it could be a combination of the two, which are the objective test and the performance-based assessment. Now, in performance task, the performance tasks contribute the most to the student's quarterly grade because it weighs 40% to 60%. This means that the Department of Education put weight more on the performance task. Now, moving on to the authentic assessment. Now, authentic assessment, this includes the performance task or performance-based assessment. Now, in other words, the performance task or performance-based assessment falls under the authentic assessment. Now, what is authentic assessment? This is a form of assessment in which students are asked to perform real-world tasks and demonstrate meaning application of essential knowledge and skills. This is according to Moeller in 2011. On the other hand, Wiggins in 1987 states that authentic assessment is engaging in worthy problems or questions of importance in which students must use knowledge to fashion performances effectively and creatively. This means, in shorter terms, authentic assessment this is the application of the student's knowledge and skills in a real-world scenario or in a real-world setting. Now, when constructing performance tasks, as future teachers, we should be guided by the acronym GRASP shared by Wiggins and McTyke in 2004. GRASP or the GRASPS. Now, what is the acronym GRASPS or GRASP? So, the G here is the goal, R for the role, A for the audience, the S stands for the situation, P for product, and the S stands for standards and criteria indicators. Now, let's talk about the GRASP one by one. First is the goal. Now, how to come up with a performance task guided by the GRASPs. First is the goal. The goal means to provide a statement of the task, or is to establish the goal of the task, state the problem, challenge, or obstacle in the task. Let's take this for example. Instill health consciousness among the young by particularly paying attention to their eating habits. Now, the goal in the example here is to instill health consciousness. Now, the challenge, or obstacle in the task provided is the eating habits of the young people. Now, that is for the goal. Moving on to the role. The role is to define the role of the students for the task or state the job of the students for the task. It's like the responsibility or what will the students will do. That is for the role. For example, you are officers of health club, and one of your objectives as a club is to promote health consciousness among the students. So the job or the role here of the students is as an officers of health club. Now, their job or their objective of their club is to promote health consciousness among the students. Now, that is for the role. Moving on to the audience. This is to identify the target audience within the context of this scenario. This means who are the applicable participants of the given task. For example, your brochure is intended for all elementary students in your school. So here, the participants or the target audience are the elementary students in your school. Now, moving on to the situation. Here, the situation is to explain the situation, what is the context and the challenge of the performance. Let's take this for example. Most elementary students are fond of junk foods and soft drinks. A big number of students are obese and underweight. So here, in the example, the example explains the situation of the given task as well as the context and the challenge. So the situation here is that most of the elementary students are obese and underweight, and because of that, because the cause of their obesity and having underweight is that because of they are fond of junk foods and soft drinks. So the situation here is the students more into junk foods and soft drinks, and then the challenge here is that the students are obese and underweight because of junk foods and soft drinks. So when we talk about obese, this means overweight or above average of the students, above normal of the students' normal weight according to their height as well as to their age. And when we talk about underweight, this means the students is below normal, or their weight is not in accordance to their age as well as to their height. Now moving on to the product. Clarify what the students will create and why they will create it. So here in the product, as teacher, you should state or clarify, make clear statement on what they will be doing. So an example here is come up with a brochure on healthy eating habits. So here, the students will create a brochure, and then the brochure should include the following: focus on healthy eating habits. The brochure should include graphics and use simple, non-technical English language. So here, it was made clear on what will the students will create and why they will create it. Obviously, in the example, the reason why they will create a brochure is to promote health consciousness, specifically on about healthy eating habits of the elementary students. Lastly is the standards and criteria. Identify specific standards for success, give rubric to the students, or develop them with the students. So when we talk about standards and criteria, this is similar to the rubric or the students' basis on making the performance or making the brochure. For example, you will be graded along the following criteria. First is the accuracy of content, 10 points. Organization of information, 10 points. Clarity of content, 10 points. Appropriateness of graphics and pictures, 10 points. So as we all know, when making a brochure, it is more appear aesthetic if this includes if the brochure has graphics and pictures. In consideration, of course, to the your target audience, which are the elementary students, it is more pleasing to the eye of the students if it has graphics and pictures. That weighs 10 points. Next is attractiveness or the appearance of the brochure, 10 points, as well as the grammatical accuracy, 10 points. So as we all know, a brochure should include text, and the text should be grammatically correct or grammatically accurate, and that is 10 points. So overall, the brochure weighs 60 points. So the students should come up or get 60 points as a perfect score for their brochure. Now that's all for the GRASP, its meaning, its the acronyms meaning, as well as the examples. Now let's move on to the guidelines for performance assessment. According to Irish and Russell in 2008, they cited 4 issues that must be considered in the use of performance assessment. First guideline is to establish a clear purpose. Now, as teacher, you should provide a clear purpose of the performance. Now, what is the purpose of the performance assessment? It could be either to assign a grade, to evaluate the student's progress, to generate products to be included in a learning portfolio, or to provide student sample of work for college admission. So the purpose of the performance assessment should be made clear to the students first. Next, or the second guideline, is to identifying observable criteria. This should be made clear to students at the beginning of teaching and learning process. So the criteria should be made clear, or it should be informed at the beginning or ahead of time of the teaching learning process, because this would help the teacher or anyone to assess the performance or that matter and make observations in a more focused and systematic way. Now, why this would help the teacher to assess the performance in a more focused and systematic way? Because if the teacher, when we talk about the criteria or the rubric, the teacher has already the criteria or the indicators or the skills that the teacher should observe or should seek when there is a performance. So by that, the teacher can be guided or more focused, and he or she could assess the student's performance in a chronological way or systematic way. Third is providing an appropriate setting, observing the target behavior in a natural setting or in a prepared setting. For example, as teacher, you will observe the student teachers demonstration in a natural setting. For example, let's say in a not in a real classroom with real students. For example, the student's teacher is assigned to grade 3 students. So his or her students are grade 3 pupils. Or in a prepared setting, let's say for example, you will announce demonstration ahead of time, and the students are his or her classmates, and then he or she will demonstrate the given topic or the given task with his or her classmates as his or her students. Now, according to the assessment experts, it is more appropriate to observe the student teachers' performance not just once, because the knowledge and the skills of the student cannot be seen or cannot be presented in just one performance. It could be in a series or more than one performance. Now, that's for providing an appropriate setting. Lastly is judging or scoring the performance. There should be a scoring rubric to ensure objectivity of scoring. Of course, the performance should have a rubric. This will serve as the basis for the students on how to perform the given task, as well as this will help the teacher or the teacher to give score. This is to ensure objectivity of scoring. That's why when judging or scoring the performance, the teacher should prepare a scoring rubric to ensure objectivity of scoring, as well as to assess the performance in a chronological way. Now, that's all for the guidelines of performance. I hope you have learned something. Thank you.